Hello, for friends who are watching this video. This is Brian. Out of personal interest, I'd love to share something about I Ching and Gua, an old wisdom of Chinese culture. In this video, I would try to unveil the logic and rules behind I Ching and Gua, make it simple and straightforward for everyone of interest to understand what it is basically about and how it works. The first question would be, what is I Ching and what is Gua? From Wikipedia, I Ching was known as Book of Changes, an ancient Chinese divination text. From movies, animations, or daily life experience, you may have seen or heard about I Ching, Bagua, or something related, like Baguazhang, a Chinese martial art form associated with I Ching theory, or like a magic circle in some kinds of animation fights, or something like Feng Shui, the way of wind and water, some kind of divination, which guides people about how to arrange objects to achieve harmony. Well, no matter what you recall, you may feel it is complicated, mysterious, even useless. But today I'm going to tell that is not true. In fact, I Ching is simply a language system that is designed to describe and interpret changes. Let's forget about mysterism thing. I Ching can survive for 1,000 years for some reason. As a book of changes, it must be simple and straightforward to understand and use, and I will help remove the mysterious veil of I Ching in this video. I interpret I Ching as a language of change. As a language, it must have some common features. Let's take English as an example. The foundation of English is alphabets, A, B, C, D. And with alphabets, we can make words. With words, we can make sentence. And then we can have talks, discussions, and even read a book. I Ching also shows such kind of multi-level structure. The foundation of this language is the two elements, yin and yang. Specifically, yang is represented as a symbol like a short line, while yin is represented as a broken one, a divided line. With the two elements, we have the basic 4 transformations, and then the 8 basic change forms, and finally the 64 combos of changes. So if you are confused, I know you are, but be patient. I will explain what these are all about soon. Let's begin with the two elements, yang and yin. As you can see, they are represented as a straight line and a divided line. According to a book by Hao Fengxu, yang element, marked as a straight line, represents the horizon line in the daytime, while yin element, marked as a divided line, represents the horizon line at night. Since in the nighttime, people cannot see the horizon line, but they know it is there, so they will use a divided line as a countermark to yang. And once ancient Chinese people developed this kind of two elements, they gradually correlate the different meanings with these two elements from their daily life experience. As for yang, it correlates with sky, flowing upwards, bright and warm, stiff and tough, energetic and vivid, mobile and changeable. As for yin, it is associated with ground, falling down, being dark and cold, soft and gentle, frozen and still, dormant and tending to preserve the original state from being changed. Now you have known something about the two elements, yin and yang. Just like making words out of alphabets, we can use yin and yang to describe the simple changes, which gives us the 4 basic transformations. The ancient Chinese used 2 parallel elements to mark the 4 transformations, like this 4 on the left-hand side. The transformation always takes place from the bottom to the top. This rule is likely out of the life experience about observing hot vapor or smoke moving up. Let us take 2 changes as examples to explain. Shaoyin, It means that a transformation from a yang state to a yin state, like a cup of hot chocolate cooling down. As a comparison, shaoyang, which means a transformation from a yin state to a yang state, just like using microwave to defrost a frozen meat or heat a cup of cold milk. Very simple, right? But only 4 transformations are far from being enough to interpret all different kinds of changes. The resolution is too low. This is too simple. So we need to introduce more dimensions to describe a change. And that's going to give us the 8 basic change forms. In the 8 basic changes, the ancient Chinese introduced 3 dimensions to describe a change. The first dimension is the tendency of a change. Is it moving up or falling down? Does it tend to induce new things or prevent things from being changed? Is it a positive change or a negative one? Oftentimes, you need to predefine the context and set a change with specific positive and negative directions, like a coordinate axis. The second dimension is easy to understand, which refers to when the change takes place, whether it occurs in a detectable way or in an undetectable way. Does it happen quietly or in a causing attention way? Anyone notices the occurrence of this event? The third dimension is the outcome. After the change took place, whether there are new things generated or not out of it, whether there is any difference made out of this process in terms of what this change is about. Let's give one example. A change which tends to make a difference, like rising up or transforming in a positive way, and it takes place quietly without any detectable sign. And in the end, there's no new things generated out of this process, which give us a yang, a yin, and a yin. These 3 elements form one gua, a basic change form known as gen gua. Gen in Chinese refers to mountain. Mountain peaks are pointing to the sky, about which ancient Chinese feel that mountain tends to grow higher towards the sky. Meantime, the mountain is still heavy and not easily changed. As a result, the ancient Chinese use gengua to describe such kind of change. And for people who show interests, you can try to play with the other 7 gua following the same rules. So once we understand the 4 basic transformations and the 8 basic change forms, we can have combos to describe more complicated processes. And this gives us the 64 change combinations. As we learned from previous slides, transformation takes place from the bottom state to upper state. But in this case, it is very similar to what we learned in mathematics, the function. X, I define it as the bottom state. So X is the independent variable, and Y is the dependent variable. So the change took place from the bottom state to the upper state, so from X to Y, which means, so in this case, both X and Y are representing changes. And change X takes place first, and then change Y occurs. Change X affects the subsequent occurrence of change Y. There are some causal relationship behind. Both X and Y are representing change, which can be interpreted as the 8 basic change forms. And thus, after joining together, there are in total 64 different combinations, which can be considered as 64 different functions of change. And the interpretation rules are shown here. And the most important one of the rules is we need to predefine the context, which gives us the specific directions about what is positive and what is negative, and what exactly we are looking at, and what exactly we are trying to interpret it, and how we're going to do the interpretation. And this is very important. Okay, so after knowing about all the rules, so we can play with some specific case. So case 1, a company suddenly issued an announcement that they would apply new regulatory rules to replace the old ones so as to make more profits. And this sudden change made John feel uncomfortable. So he approached the leadership team and expressed his disagreement. Well, after the discussion, John was convinced and willing to obey the new rules. In this case, it is clear that we are describing a change process between the company and John. So we have company as X and John as Y because there are some causal relationship between these two things. Also, this case is about new things and old things. Since new things seems to be more profitable, I define it as positive and set the old things as negative. For a company, it tends to induce new things, which gives a yang first. The announcement is made suddenly, without any detectable sign about what's going to happen, thus giving us a yin as the second symbol. And the result is that new rules replace the old ones. Things changed, thus giving a yang at the end. As for John, he want to make things unchanged. He want to have the old rules preserved, thus giving a yin first. He took action by approaching the leadership team and having a discussion, indicating a detectable change. So he is taking action which can be seen, can be observed, and thus giving a yang in the middle. And finally, he was convinced and willing to obey new rules. So he changed his manner, new things coming out of this process, giving a yang at the end. So taking together, this gives us a 格卦, which means a smooth reforming process. For people who consider new rules are positive, this whole change process refers to a smooth reform. In the second case, let's be more specific. One day, the leadership board of a biotech company suddenly issued an announcement that the company would adopt a transformation into a labor-intensive business, which would take effect immediately. Li, the R&D team leader, disagreed with this decision. He approached the leadership team and expressed his concern about the decision. To his point, innovation is the key to success for any kinds of high-tech companies. But his suggestion did not pass. He had to live with this decision. Yeah, following the same rules. We first specify the context that define innovation as positive and labor-intensive as negative. Then we can draw symbols for both the leadership and Li, as you can see from the slides. And in the end, we have a Yi Gua, which means follow the change. And for people like Li, who value innovation driving business as good things over labor-intensive type, this change means they have to make compromise and adapt to the reality, even in a passive way. Follow the change. In the last case that I'd love to share here is still about company decision and employee response. This time, the leadership team of a biotech company suddenly issued an announcement that the company would transform into an innovation-driving business. Howard, a team leader, disagreed with this decision, since most of his work is labor-intensive type, and the members in his team were more skilled in the old technologies but are not very good at innovation things. So he approached the leadership team the same as what John and Li did and tried to persuade the team leader, the CEO, to change his mind. But eventually, his suggestion did not fly. Similarly, we define innovation as positive since I personally value it. Then, following the same rules, we can draw both guas for the leadership team and the Harvard side, which turns out to be a 积极卦. 积极卦 means although something has been achieved, but potential danger is lurking behind, which may bring up uncertainties in the future. And for those who value innovation like me and Lee, they need to be careful about the potential dangerous factors like people who do not support this opinion, like Harvard. At last, I'd love to share something about how we can apply I Ching and Gua in our daily life. The most straightforward use of it is to interpret daily life events, no matter big or small. It can serve as a dictionary of changes and how to respond. For instance, if a couple quarrels, the wife and husband can do a role play game. So one play the X and one play the Y. By setting up a context of conflict, they can deduct what responses his or her partner gonna take and what that gonna lead to by checking the dictionary from I Ching. So in this way, they can adjust their behaviors and decisions, and they can make different choices and to see what's gonna happen according to the I Ching, the book of change. And in this way, they may be able to achieve a happy win-win end, or at least they could do an evaluation about their bad decisions. Well, honestly, I would say this game is gonna take a lot of time if they really started to play, but I think it's gonna be fun. This is about the interpretation function and guidance value of I Ching, but I would expect more out of it. So as a language system, that's according to my understanding, it may be possible to adopt it in building up some kind of programs and achieve a more complicated artificial intelligence, the AI. But honestly, since I am not the expert in that field, that would be only my random guess. But if it happens, it's gonna be very cool. And in the end, I would clarify that the content in this sharing is basically out of my personal study. So it could be wrong, and there could be many pits and flows, and discussions, comments are welcome. So if you know more, please share, and I'd love to learn. And thank you for watching, and this is Brian.